themselves very liberal, and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we talk about traditional,
what does that mean to you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. Woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression.
So Jim Crow, the racial discrimination, in banking, housing, the redlining, none of that was hierarchy of equality or racial of discriminations in American society. White people have no shame in the things that they say. This is why I want complete distance from these people. They have no shame. They can't define wokeness, but they claim everything that happens negative is caused by so-called wokeness. Let me see.
An American election, but also of something we don't usually find in American history: the violent overthrow of a democratically elected government. In the late 1800s, Wilmington, North Carolina was the state's largest city. It had a majority Black population, and historians today describe it as a rarity in the post-Civil War American South.
Wilmington, prior to November 1898, was what the New South could be at the cusp of the 20th century.
There was an unusual degree of Black prosperity.
In Wilmington, there were successful Black entrepreneurs, doctors, teachers, but also Black elected officials. And for a time, that was true throughout the state. Take a look at the politicians on this poster of the 1889 North Carolina House of Representatives. Here at the bottom are Black Republican representatives, some from Wilmington. North Carolina also sent 4 Black Republicans to the U.S. Congress between 1875 and 1899. The Democratic and Republican parties of 1898 in many ways occupied opposite parts of the political spectrum than they do today.
Most African Americans were voting for the Republican Party, and the Democratic Party was white voters almost exclusively. White supremacy was the central focus of the platform for the Democratic Party.
Republicans in North Carolina were successful in part because of a third party called the Populist Party, made up of mostly white farmers fed up with the tough economic times. North Carolina populists joined up with Republicans to form what they called the Fusion Party. And in the elections of 1894 and 1896, the Fusion Party defeated the Democrats in sweeping victories statewide. That meant North Carolina now had a government that shared power between Black and white politicians, including a newly elected Republican governor. Together, they moved towards reforms that would favor Black Americans and working-class whites.
This was something that the Democratic Party folks were simply not going to accept.
A multiracial government wasn't just a disappointment for Democrats. It was more like a humiliation. They needed a plan to take back control of the state in the next election. So party leaders like Furnifold Simmons, future U.S. Senator, Charles Aycock, future North Carolina governor, and this man, Alfred Moore Waddell, came up with one: to beat the Fusion Party by luring white populist voters away from their alliance with black voters. Wilmington, with a large black population and a local fusion government in power, would be a focus of their campaign. The state Democratic Party handbook for 1898 laid out their goal: consolidate the white vote by stoking white anger and resentment. It said, "This is a white man's country, and white men must control and govern it." Their most effective tool was the media. One of North Carolina's biggest newspapers was a Democratic Party mouthpiece.
Let's be clear, this is today's current playbook. This is the woke movement. This is why blacks cannot work with Europeans in creating a productive society, because the poor Europeans cling to their whiteness and they will align with the elite whites who are cleaning all of our clocks out. This is what woke is about. This is when you hear them targeting woke agenda, woke movement. It is an old playbook. Elite Europeans have always used racism and white people insecurity as far as competing with black people as a means to generate their vote and generate their support, even though it's detrimental to those very same white people. So when you hear white people say, well, I'm not rich, when we speak about racist issues, you're not rich because your ignorant ass granddaddies and grandfathers were so focused on holding black people back that they allowed their clocks to be cleaned by the white elites. And every time our people tried to work with them to get them to understand what was occurring in American society and how we can overcome that, these white people betrayed us. This happens consistently. This is the woke movement today. The woke movement today could be traced back to the confusion group, the fusion political movement.
And racist political cartoons throughout 1898.
Not everybody was literate in 1898, but to see a political cartoon of the type that ran, you may not be able to read it, but you know exactly what it means.
Many of the cartoons were centered on the threat of Negro rule, even though the fusion government was mostly white. They also played up another fear.
Black men threatening white women became a theme. White men need to do all that they can to protect white womanhood.
This was all part of North Carolina Democratic strategy.
This is the same thing Trump did when he called the Latinos rapists. This is the same thing when you hear white people talk about crime and letting crime go in the inner city as far as not charging people for thefts and things of that nature. It is the same trope. White people bring back the same concept. They repeat the same process. That's why you can see that majority of poor white people voted for Donald Trump. The least educated voted for this billionaire who was born into wealth, thinking he looks like them or he assembles like them. He's like them. He speaks for them. And he has no connection to them, their lifestyle or the environment or the life that they live. But they connect to their whiteness and their fear of competing against black people. So when white people say, oh, well, my granddaddy, well, I'm white, I'm not rich, because y'all so focused on holding black people down that you can't progress and you allow the white elites to clean you out, to get over on you. Because all they have to do is bring up racism, is target blacks. All they had to do to get you to hate Obama was say he was Muslim, say he was anything. Militias grew 600% just because Obama became president. After you just had Bush, who just sent you into a false war. But you didn't go join militias 1,000%. Because you had this racist who was sending your kids off to die.
It echoed the national racist rhetoric of the time. In one speech that Democrats printed in a Wilmington paper, A prominent Georgia writer named Rebecca Felton said,
If it takes lynching a black man a day to protect white womanhood, I say lynch.
Her speech prompted a Wilmington black man named Alex.
These even undesirable women. Don't nobody even want this disgusting looking.
Manley, owner of the Black Run Daily Record newspaper, to respond with a column. He made a simple observation that, at the time, was shocking.
That white women who had liaisons with black men did so voluntarily and enthusiastically.
Manley wrote, every Negro lynched is called a big burly black brute, when in fact, many were sufficiently attractive for white girls to fall in love with them.
Manley pretty much said, in a nutshell, sometimes white women choose to be with black men.
Manley's editorial became another tool for Democrats. Newspapers reprinted it, called it a horrid slander, and ran comments about it on a daily basis. It was just a few months before the election, and white voters were angry.
By the time...
Pure jealousy and insecurity. White men upset that white women are attracted to black men. It's nothing black people are going to be able to do to be able to work with white people because white people are so insecure about black people. It's nothing we can do about their insecurity except for be less than them. That's what they want. They want you to accept living in poverty. They want you to accept not having nothing so that they can feel above you. You trying to arise above your level, uplift your people, you progressing to them means they have to lose. This is how white people feel. If black people have something, that means they don't. Because they lived off of you for so long. Woke. In activism and political, woke means alert to racial prejudice and discrimination. Beginning in the 2010, it came to encompass a broader awareness of social inequalities such as sexism and has also been used as shorthand for American left ideas involving identity politics and social justice, such as the notion of white privilege and slavery reparations for African Americans, originating as an objective in African American vernacular English. The word may also be used as a noun. The phrase "stay woke" had emerged AAV by the 1930s in some contexts, referring to an awareness of social and political issues affecting African Americans. The phrase was uttered in a recording by Lee Bailey and later by Erykah Badu during the 2014 Ferguson protest. The phrase was popularized by Black Lives Matter activists seeking to raise awareness about police shootings of African Americans. Seeing use of Black Twitter as term woke became an internet memes and was increasingly used by white people, often to single their support for Black Lives Matter, which some commentators have criticized as cultural appropriation, mainly associated with the millennial generation. The term spread internationally and was added to the Oxford English Dictionary in 2017. The term woke wishing and woke capitalism were coined to describe companies who single support for progressive causes as a result of genuine change. By 2020, members of the political center and right wings in several Western countries were used the term woke, often in an ironic way, as an insult for various progressive or leftist movements. The ideology perceives as overzealous, performative, or insincere in terms. Some commentators come to consider it an offensive term with negative associations to those who promote political ideas involving identity of race. Be clear, woke is code word for black. Anything that supports black or when they blame anything on wokeness, the objective is to blame it on blacks. This is why you can do anything to white people. This is why we have mass bank failures, because you can just focus everything on black people. This is how white people function. This is how the elites are able to oppress poor white people.